I was celebrating my birthday when I went to the kitchen for drinks and froze. My girlfriend was kissing my cousin. Even worse, my family already knew and hid it from me. When I asked why, my mom said, "We don't want to ruin the celebration," and my dad added, "Don't make a big deal." I walked out, and now they're blaming me. My name's Michael, and I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. You know how some birthdays just stick with you forever? Well, my 30th was supposed to be one of the good ones. I had this whole picture in my head, backyard barbecue at my parents' place, family laughing around the picnic tables, maybe some classic rock playing from Dad's old boombox. The works, you know? I'd been planning this thing for weeks, calling relatives, making sure everyone could make it. My girlfriend Sarah had been helping me organize everything, and honestly, I was feeling pretty good about life. The day started perfect. Mom made her famous potato salad. Dad fired up the grill at noon sharp like he always does, and my uncle showed up with coolers full of beer. My cousins drove in from Toledo, and even my great-aunt Helen made the trip, which was saying something since she hadn't left her house in like 2 years. Sarah looked amazing in this blue sundress, helping my mom set up the tables and chatting with everyone like she'd been part of the family for years instead of just 8 months. Everything was going exactly how I pictured it. We played some cornhole. My cousin Danny told his usual terrible jokes that somehow still made everyone crack up, and Dad was in his element flipping burgers and acting like he was some kind of grill master. I remember thinking this was it. This was what happiness felt like. 30 years old. Good job at the insurance company. Beautiful girlfriend who got along with my family, and everyone I cared about gathered in one place. Around 3 in the afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch watching my little nephews chase each other around with water balloons. Sarah had been helping my mom clean up some spilled drinks, and my cousin Jake was floating around the party, chatting with different groups of people. The usual family party flow, you know? People moving around, conversations starting and stopping, that comfortable chaos that happens when you get a bunch of relatives together. But then I got thirsty. Simple as that. I figured I'd grab another beer from the kitchen. Sarah was still inside somewhere helping with party stuff, and I could see Jake had wandered off from the group. He was talking in near the grill. The kitchen was empty except for my Aunt Linda, doing dishes, humming along to some oldie station playing on the counter radio. I grabbed a Bud Light from the fridge, and that's when I heard voices from the family room. Now, here's the thing about my family. We're not quiet people. We talk loud, we laugh loud, we do everything loud. So when I heard hushed voices coming from the next room, something about it felt off. Call it curiosity or maybe just bad timing, but I walked toward the sound. The family room connected the kitchen through this wide doorway, and from where I was standing, I could see the couch, but whoever was on it couldn't see me. What I saw made my stomach drop straight through the floor. Sarah was pressed up against the couch cushions, and my cousin Jake, the same Jake who'd just been telling us about his new job, had his hands on her waist, kissing her like his life depended on it. And she wasn't pushing him away. She wasn't fighting it. Her arms were around his neck, and she was kissing him right back. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds, just processing what I was seeing. The beer bottle was getting warm in my hand, and I could still hear my Aunt Linda humming in the kitchen behind me. Outside, I could hear my dad laughing at something, probably one of Danny's jokes, and kids screaming as they played. Normal family party sounds, while my world was imploding 10 feet away from me. They broke apart suddenly, and I guess they sensed someone watching because they both turned toward the doorway at the same time. Sarah's face went white when she saw me, and Jake just froze with this deer-in-headlights look. For a split second, nobody moved. Then Sarah started to say something, but I held up my hand to stop her. I didn't want to hear whatever excuse she was about to come up with. The weird thing is, I wasn't angry yet. I was just empty, like someone had reached into my chest and scooped out everything that made me feel human. I set the beer down on the side table. Didn't slam it, didn't throw it, just set it down nice and careful. Then I looked at both of them, these two people who 30 seconds ago I thought I knew, and I realized I had no idea who they really were. Sarah stood up, smoothing down her dress, and started walking toward me with this panicked expression. Jake stayed on the couch but was running his hands through his hair like he was trying to figure out what to say. The whole scene felt surreal, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life falling apart. But the sick feeling in my stomach reminded me this was definitely my reality. I turned around and walked back through the kitchen, past my Aunt Linda, who was still humming and washing dishes. She looked up and smiled at me, completely oblivious to the fact that my life had just been turned upside down. I managed to smile back somehow, then kept walking toward the back door where my birthday party was still going strong. Everyone was laughing and having a great time, celebrating me, while I felt like I was drowning. That's when it hit me. The anger, not at Sarah, not even at Jake really, but at the whole situation. At the fact that this was happening at my birthday party, in my parent house, surrounded by my family, at the timing of it all, at how normal everything looked from the outside, while my insides were being shredded. I was 30 years old, and I just learned that apparently I didn't know anything about anything. Walking back outside felt like moving through thick mud. Everything looked the same. Dad still manning the grill. My nephew still running around screaming. Uncle Pete still telling the same story about his fishing trip that everyone had heard a million times. But I felt like I was watching it all through bulletproof glass. Nothing could touch me, but I couldn't touch anything either. I found myself standing in the middle of my own birthday party, surrounded by people who supposedly cared about me, and I had never felt more alone in my life. The crazy part was I started wondering if I was the only one who didn't know. You know that feeling when everyone's laughing at a joke, and you're the only one who doesn't get it? That's exactly what this felt like, except the joke was my entire relationship. Sarah came outside about 5 minutes later, looking like she'd been crying. She walked straight over to me with this determined expression, like she was going to explain everything and make it all okay. But I just looked at her and shook my head. I wasn't ready for whatever story she was about to tell me. Jake appeared right behind her, trying to look casual but failing miserably. The guy couldn't even make eye contact with me. That's when I decided to do something that probably wasn't the smartest move, but felt necessary at the time. I walked over to where most of my family was gathered around the picnic table. Mom, Dad, a few aunts and uncles, my older brother Mike, who'd driven down from Detroit. They were all laughing about something, having a great time at my expense apparently. I stood there for a second, just looking at them. Then I asked a question that changed everything. I looked around the table and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Did you all know? Just like that. Simple question, but it cut through all the laughter like a knife through butter. Suddenly, everyone got real quiet, real fast. My mom's face went red, and she started fidgeting with her napkin. Dad just stared at his beer bottle, like it was the most interesting thing in the world. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, my mom cleared her throat and looked at me with this pitying expression that made my skin crawl. She said something about not wanting to ruin my special day, about how they thought it would be better if I found out after the party. After the party. Like my birthday was more important than my entire relationship being a lie. But here's what really got to me. Nobody looked surprised. Not one person at that table acted shocked or confused about what I was talking about. They all just looked uncomfortable, like I had brought up something embarrassing at dinner. My own family had been sitting there, eating my birthday cake and drinking my beer, knowing that my girlfriend was fooling around with my cousin, and they all decided that keeping me in the dark was the better option. My dad finally spoke up, but instead of apologizing or showing any kind of support, he told me I was making a scene. He said I was being dramatic, and that I should handle this like an adult. Handle it like an adult? I'm standing there finding out that my family have been lying to me for who knows how long, and I'm the one being dramatic? The man who taught me to ride a bike and throw a football was sitting there telling me to basically shut up and deal with it. My brother Mike, who I'd always looked up to, just shrugged and mumbled something about how these things happen. These things happen. Like my girlfriend cheating on me with my cousin was just some normal part of life that I should have expected. Like I was naive for thinking the people closest to me would have my back when everything fell apart. The worst part was watching my cousins and uncles. These were guys I'd grown up with, played sports with in high school, gone to each other's weddings. And they were all suddenly very interested in their food or their drinks or literally anything that wasn't standing there asking for basic human decency. A couple of them even started having their own conversations, like I wasn't even there. I looked around that table, at these people who had raised me and shaped me and supposedly loved me, and I realized something that probably should have been obvious years ago. When push came to shove, they were going to protect themselves first. They'd rather let me walk around looking like an idiot than deal with the uncomfortable conversation. They'd rather preserve the peace at a family gathering than stand up for what was right. Sarah was standing behind me the whole time, probably hoping my family would help smooth things over. But when it became clear that wasn't going to happen, she tried a different approach. She started talking about how sorry she was, how it wasn't supposed to happen, how she never meant to hurt me. All the usual lines that people use when they get caught doing something they know is wrong. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was too busy processing the fact that my entire support system had just crumbled in the span of about 10 minutes. The people who were supposed to have my back, no matter what, had chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. They'd chosen comfort over loyalty, avoiding conflict over doing the right thing, and that hurt worse than anything Sarah or Jake could have done to me. Looking back, I think that moment taught me more about family dynamics than 30 years of birthday parties and Christmas dinners ever had. I learned that blood doesn't automatically mean someone will stand by you when things get tough. I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the first ones to throw you under the bus when it's convenient. And I learned that being alone isn't always the worst thing that can happen to you. Sometimes being surrounded by people who don't really see you is much worse. Standing there looking at my family, I felt something inside me just snap. Not in a violent way, but more like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long. All the politeness, all the family loyalty, all the keeping the peace nonsense that had been drilled into me since I was a kid, all just disappeared. I was done being the nice guy who gets walked all over while everyone else protects their own comfort. I picked up my beer bottle from the picnic table, and I'm not proud of this, but I slammed it down hard enough that foam shot out the top and splashed all over my mom's potato salad. The sound made everyone jump, and suddenly all eyes were on me again. But this time, I didn't care about making them uncomfortable. They'd already shown me exactly how much my comfort mattered to them. I told them all exactly what I thought about their little conspiracy. I said that if they thought protecting Jake and avoiding awkwardness was more important than being honest with me, then they could enjoy the rest of my birthday party without me. My voice was shaking, not from fear, but from pure anger. I'd never talked to my family like that before, but then again, they'd never betrayed me like that before either. The reactions were exactly what you'd expect from a group of people who'd just been called out for their bad behavior. My mom started crying and saying I was breaking her heart, like somehow I was a villain in this situation. My dad got that red-faced look he gets when he's angry, but try and keep it together in front of everyone. A couple of my uncles started muttering about me being disrespectful, which was rich coming from people who just spent the afternoon lying to my face. But the person who really made my blood boil was Jake. This guy had the nerve to step forward like he was going to be the peacemaker. He started talking about how sorry he was, how he never meant for it to happen, how we were family and we should work this out. Family. The same family angle that everyone else had been using to justify keeping me in the dark. I told him exactly what he could do with his apology, and let's just say it wasn't very family-friendly. Sarah was still standing there looking like a deer in headlights, probably hoping someone would step in and fix the situation for her. When she realized that wasn't going to happen, she tried to grab my arm and pull me aside for a private conversation. I yanked my arm away so hard that she stumbled backward a little. I told her that we were done, right there in front of everyone. No private talks, no second chances, no working through it. Done. What happened next still makes me angry when I think about it. Instead of anyone acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, they'd handled this whole thing wrong, they all started making me feel like I was the problem. My mom said I was ruining everyone's good time. My dad accused me of being selfish and immature. Even my brother Mike, who I'd always counted on to be in my corner, told me I was overreacting and that I should calm down and think about this rationally. Rationally? Like there was some rational way to process the fact that everyone I trusted had been lying to me. Like there was some mature, adult way to handle finding out that your girlfriend was cheating on you with your cousin while your entire family watched it happen and said nothing. I was 30 years old, not 13. I knew exactly what I was doing, and what I was doing was getting the hell out of there. I walked back into the house to grab my car keys. And of course, Sarah followed me. She cornered me in the hallway and started the whole speech about how it was a mistake, how she loved me, how Jake had pursued her, and she'd been confused and vulnerable. The usual blame shifting that cheaters do when they get caught. But I wasn't buying any of it. If she'd been confused and vulnerable, she could have talked to me about it instead of making out with my cousin at my birthday party. The thing that really sealed the deal for me was when she said that if I just gave her another chance, she'd never see Jake again, and we could put this whole thing behind us. Put behind us. Like it was some minor disagreement about what movie to watch, not a complete violation of trust and respect. She genuinely seemed to think that if she just said the right words, I forgive her and we go back to playing happy couple. I told her something I'd never said to anyone before in my life. I told her that she wasn't sorry about what she did. She was sorry she got caught. And there's a huge difference between those two things. If I hadn't walked into that room at that exact moment, she probably would have kept fooling around with Jake for weeks or months while I went on believing everything was fine. The only reason she was standing there apologizing was because her hand got forced. By this point, I could hear people outside starting to pack up the party. Chairs being folded, coolers being loaded into cars, the usual sound of family gathering coming to an end. But instead of the normal happy exhaustion that comes after a good party, there was this uncomfortable tension in the air. Everyone was eager to get out of there and avoid any more drama. I grabbed my overnight bag from my old bedroom. I'd been planning to stay the night at my parents' house, since everyone was drinking and it seemed safer. But now the idea of sleeping under the same roof as people who betrayed me made my skin crawl. I threw my stuff in the bag as fast as I could, while Sarah stood in the doorway, making one last desperate attempt to change my mind. When I walked back outside with my bag, the party was basically over. Most people had already left, probably relieved to escape the awkwardness. The ones who were still there were cleaning up and shooting me. These looks like I was the one who'd ruined everything. My parents were standing by the back door, clearly waiting for me to apologize and make everything okay again. But I was fresh out of apologies for other people's bad behavior. I walked straight to my car without saying goodbye to anyone. My mom called after me, asking where I was going, but I just kept walking. Sarah followed me all the way to the driveway, still talking about second chances and working things out. I got in my car, started the engine, and rolled down the window just long enough to tell her that this was her second chance, her chance to figure out what she really wanted, without dragging me through any more of her confusion. I drove through the night with no real destination in mind, just putting miles between me and Cleveland. My phone kept buzzing, calls from my mom, dad, even Sarah, but I let them all go to voicemail. Around dawn, I found myself parked at a truck stop somewhere in Indiana, drinking terrible coffee and trying to figure out what came next. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I wasn't going back. Chicago had always seemed like a place where people could reinvent themselves, and I figured if I was going to start over, I might as well go big. I had some money saved up. My job at the insurance company could probably be done remotely for a while, and honestly, staying in Ohio felt impossible after everything that had happened. So I drove straight into the city and started looking for a place to live. The first few months were rough. Not gonna lie. I found this tiny studio apartment in Lincoln Park that cost more per month than my mortgage back home, but it was mine and nobody there knew my story. I'd wake up every morning and remember all over again that my old life was gone, but instead of feeling sorry for myself, I started feeling something else, relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about family drama or managing other people's feelings. My family kept calling for weeks. Long voicemails from my mom about how much she missed me and how we needed to talk things through like adults. Messages from my dad telling me I was being stubborn and that family problems shouldn't destroy family relationships. Even Jake had the nerve to call a couple times, leaving these rambling apologies about how he made a mistake and wanted to make things right. I listened to exactly none of them. But here's what nobody tells you about cutting toxic people out of your life. It's scary at first, but then it becomes incredibly peaceful. I didn't have to worry about walking on eggshells or managing everyone else's emotions or pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I could just focus on building the life I actually wanted instead of the life everyone expected me to want. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects at the insurance company, staying late, volunteering for assignments that nobody else wanted. My boss noticed pretty quickly that something had changed. I was more focused, more driven, more willing to take risks. Within 6 months, I'd gotten a promotion and a raise that would have taken years to achieve back in Cleveland. Success, it turns out, comes easier when you're not constantly distracted by other people's dysfunction. The weird part was how much I didn't miss Sarah. I'd been with her for almost a year, and I thought I was in love with her. But once I was away from the situation, I realized most of what I felt was probably just habit and convenience. She'd fit into my life in Cleveland because she got along with my family and didn't rock the boat. But now that I was building a completely different kind of life, I couldn't even picture her in it. Around month 8 in Chicago, I met Emma at a coffee shop near my office. She was reading this thick book about urban planning while drinking an iced coffee, and something about the way she was completely absorbed in what she was doing caught my attention. I'm not usually the type to approach random women, but there was something about her that made me want to try being someone different than I'd been before. We started talking about the city, about how neighborhoods change and grow, about what makes a place feel like home. She was smart in a way that had nothing to do with trying to impress anyone. She was just genuinely curious about how things worked. We ended up talking for 3 hours, and when I walked home that night, I realized I hadn't thought about my family or Sarah or any of the Cleveland drama once during our entire conversation. Emma and I took things slow, which was perfect because I wasn't sure I remember how to trust someone completely. But she was patient with my guardedness, and more importantly, she didn't try to fix me or manage my emotions or convince me that I needed to make peace with people who'd hurt me. She just accepted that I had a past I didn't want to talk about and focused on building something new with me. By month 10, I'd gotten another promotion at work, and Emma and I were spending most of our free time together. She introduced me to parts of Chicago I'd never seen, took me to museums and concerts and little neighborhood festivals that made the city feel alive in a way Cleveland never had. I was becoming someone I actually liked instead of someone who just tried to keep everyone else happy. The proposal happened on New Year's Eve, right at midnight as fireworks were going off over Lake Michigan. I'd been carrying the ring around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. But when I saw her face lit up by the fireworks, I realized the perfect moment was just whenever we were together. She said yes before I even finished asking the question, and we both started laughing because we knew we were probably crazy to be getting engaged so fast, but it felt absolutely right. Our wedding was small, just a few friends, Emma's family, and nobody from Cleveland. Emma asked if I wanted to invite my parents or my brother, but I told her that the people who mattered most were already going to be there. She didn't push it, which was one of the many things I loved about her. She understood that sometimes making a new family means leaving the old one behind. When Emma got pregnant 6 months after we got married, I felt something I'd never experienced before. The absolute certainty that I would protect this little person from the kind of dysfunction I'd grown up with. Our daughter Lucy was born on a Tuesday morning in October, and when the nurse placed her in my arms, I made a promise that she would never have to wonder if her family had her back. Holding Lucy in the hospital room, with Emma sleeping peacefully beside us, I realized that everything that had happened in Cleveland had led me to this moment. If my family hadn't betrayed me, if Sarah hadn't cheated, if I hadn't been forced to start over completely, I never would have found the life I was meant to have. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. You just can't see it at the time. 2 years had passed since I'd driven away from Cleveland, and I'd built a life that felt more real and solid than anything I'd had before. Emma and I were happy. Lucy was walking and saying her first words, and I'd been promoted to senior claims manager at work. Then, right after Thanksgiving, I got a letter from my mother, not a phone call or a text, but an actual handwritten letter in the mail, which should have told me how serious she was about whatever she had to say. The letter was classic Mom. Lots of guilt wrapped up in family obligation with a heavy dose of nostalgia thrown in. She wrote about how Christmas wasn't the same without me, how my dad missed having me around to help with projects around the house, how Lucy deserved to know her grandparents and cousins. The kicker was the last paragraph, where she wrote that they were planning a big family Christmas gathering and really hoped I would come home and bring my new family to meet everyone. Emma found me reading the letter at the kitchen table and could tell immediately that something was up. I showed it to her, and she read the whole thing without saying a word. When she finished, she looked at me and asked what I wanted to do. Not what I should do or what would be the right thing to do, but what I actually wanted. That's the difference between Emma and everyone from my old life. She cared more about my feelings than about keeping the peace. I told her I didn't know, which was the truth. Part of me was curious about whether anything had changed, whether my family had learned anything from what happened. But mostly, I was angry that they thought they could just invite me back like nothing had happened, like I was the one who'd been unreasonable for walking away from people who betrayed me. They wanted me to come back on their terms, with no acknowledgement of what they'd done wrong. Emma suggested that maybe I should go, not to forgive them or rebuild relationships, but to get closure for myself. She said that sometimes you need to see people from your past through your new eyes to really understand how much you've grown. She offered to come with me for support, and when I hesitated because I didn't want to subject her and Lucy to my family's dysfunction, she reminded me that we were a team now, and she could handle whatever they threw at us. So I called my mom and told her we'd come for Christmas Day. The surprise in her voice was obvious. She'd expected me to either ignore the letter completely or write back with some kind of angry response. She immediately started planning where we'd stay, and what she'd cook, and how excited everyone would be to see me. I could tell she thought this meant everything was going back to the way it used to be, which showed me she still didn't understand why I'd left in the first place. The drive to Cleveland felt different this time. Instead of running away from something, I was choosing to face it from a position of strength. Emma kept Lucy entertained in the back seat, while I processed what I was feeling, mostly curiosity mixed with kind of detached confidence. These people couldn't hurt me anymore because I didn't need their approval or acceptance. I was coming back to show them who I'd become, not to ask for their permission to be happy. We pulled into my parents' driveway on Christmas morning, and I could see faces in the windows watching us arrive. The house looked exactly the same, but I felt like a completely different person than the one who'd left. Emma was nervous, which was understandable since she was about to meet a group of people who treated her husband terribly, but she was handling it with a kind of grace that reminded me why I'd married her. My mom opened the door before we even knocked, and her face went through about 15 different emotions when she saw us. Joy at seeing me, surprise at how good I looked, curiosity about Emma and Lucy, and something that might have been guilt when she realized how much had changed since I'd been gone. She hugged me tighter than she had since I was a kid, and I could feel her crying a little against my shoulder. Walking into that living room was like stepping back in time, except this time I was watching everything from the outside instead of being caught up in it. All the same people were there: my dad, my brother Mike, various aunts and uncles and cousins. And there, sitting on the same couch where I caught him with Sarah, was Jake. He looked uncomfortable as hell when he saw me, but he was there, which told me that the family had definitely chosen their side in this whole situation. The elephant in the room was impossible to ignore, but everyone was trying their best to pretend everything was normal. People were asking about my job in my new city, complimenting Emma on Lucy, making small talk about nothing important. But there was this underlying tension, like everyone was walking on eggshells, waiting to see how I was going to react to being back in the same room as Jake. Sarah wasn't there, which I was grateful for, but I found out later that she and Jake had dated for about 6 months after I left before realizing they had nothing in common except the drama they caused. Apparently, cheating together wasn't a solid foundation for a relationship, which would have been funny if it hadn't been so predictable. About an hour into the visit, when Lucy was napping in my old bedroom and Emma was helping my mom in the kitchen, my dad pulled me aside for what I knew was going to be the conversation we'd been avoiding. He started with the usual stuff about how good it was to see me, how proud he was of what I'd accomplished, how much they'd all miss me. Then he got to the real point. He wanted to know if we could put the past behind us and move forward as a family. That's when I realized that nothing had actually changed. They still thought this was about me being stubborn or holding grudges, instead of about them fundamentally failing to support me when I needed them most. My dad was asking me to forgive and forget, without anyone acknowledging what they'd done wrong or showing that they'd learned anything from it. They wanted their family back together, without having to do the work of earning back my trust. I looked around that room at all these people who'd known me my whole life, and I realized something that probably should have been obvious from the beginning. They weren't bad people, but they were selfish people. When it came down to choosing between doing the right thing and avoiding conflict, they'd choose avoiding conflict every time. They'd rather sacrifice my feelings and deal with uncomfortable conversations. And that wasn't a change just because a couple years had passed. So I gathered Emma and Lucy, thanked my parents for having us, and prepared to leave. My mom started crying and asking if we couldn't stay longer, couldn't work things out, couldn't find a way to be a family again. And for the first time in 2 years, I told them exactly what I thought about the whole situation. I told them that they'd had their chance to be my family when I needed them most, and they'd chosen to protect everyone except me. I told them that I'd build a real family now, one that would actually have my back when things got tough. The silence in that room was deafening. Nobody argued with me. Nobody defended their actions. Nobody even tried to apologize for what they'd done. They just sat there looking uncomfortable, probably hoping I'd tone it down and make it easier for everyone to pretend we could go back to normal. But I was done making things easier for people who'd made things harder for me when I needed them most. As we packed up to leave, Jake finally worked up the courage to approach me. He started to say something about being sorry and want to make things right, but I stopped him mid-sentence. I told him that apologies only work when the person receiving them still cares about the relationship, and I genuinely didn't care about our relationship anymore. He could be sorry all he wanted, but it didn't change anything for me because he wasn't part of my life anymore. Walking out of that house with my wife and daughter, I felt something I'd never expected to feel: gratitude. I was grateful that my family had shown me who they really were before I'd wasted any more years trying to be someone they'd approve of. I was grateful that Sarah's betrayal had forced me to leave Cleveland and find Emma. Most of all, I was grateful that I'd learned the difference between family that's given to you and family that you choose. Sometimes the family you choose is the only family that matters. So there you have it, my story about how the worst birthday of my life turned into the best thing that ever happened to me. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are, and the smartest thing you can do is believe them the first time. Sometimes walking away from people who don't value you is the only way to find people who do. And sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into. What do you think about this whole situation? Have you ever had to cut toxic people out of your life, even when they were family? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Your support means everything to this channel, and I read every single comment you guys leave. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.